like you've landed on at least two shows that have very contentious stars. Is that with Roseanne and 2.5 Men? How was that?
Well, in 2.5 Men, I was there like the first few years, and so I left before the whole thing with Charlie. And in fact, when I heard about it, I was working on an animation, and that was written here, but the animation was in Toronto. So I went back to Toronto. I was in Toronto when I heard about it, and I was really surprised. And that was just the first thing. I forget what it was, like him in a hotel with something. And my first reaction was, no, this is just the press making something big, because he was just really professional when I was there. And apparently, what I'm told was even after once it was going on, he was still showing up on time. He knew his lines. He was hitting his marks. He just didn't. This is what I was. Didn't look good. His timing was off. But it wasn't like I'm not showing up until he didn't. But no, my relationship with him, he was a really nice guy and he was a real pro. So I don't know what happened.
The good part about that show and Cheers and Roseanne and Raymond is the writing. I mean, that's why you got 8 or 9 or 10 seasons of these shows.
Thank you.
Even the Cosby Show was, I mean, they sold that for millions of dollars because of the reruns. But the shows, you watch some of this Netflix stuff, like Laurie, the guy who was the producer of 2.5 Men, is doing a show with Kutcher.
The Ranch?
Yeah, The Ranch. And I looked at it, and it's not even half as good as 2.5 Men, the writing was.
Okay.
And they say they don't use a laugh track, but it doesn't sound like it. But I don't know how long that show's gonna last, but it just got picked up, and I personally don't think it's that funny.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. Here's the thing about laugh tracks. They're not what you think they are. Basically, most of these shows are filmed in front of a live audience, and the audience is mic'd. And sometimes, like many things in film and TV, the real thing doesn't sound like what it is. So when you can hear the actual laughs, they might be like too loud, and sometimes you're actually bringing them down because the real one sounds fake. And so you have to make it like a lower volume for it to sound real. Other times it's just like an audio thing, there's cracks and they fix it. But most of the time, I've never seen a show where they just put in a laugh where it didn't happen. I mean, I can't say that's never been done, but I've worked on bad shows too, and I've never seen them do that. But there's also saying that there's an energy from a live audience who are typically on like from somewhere else. They came to LA and, oh boy, I'm going to see a TV show. And they're excited and they're happy and there's a warm-up guy, so they're much more inclined to laugh anyway.
I really have enjoyed your talk today.
Thank you.
And all your knowledge. So you do, from your books, you sort of do sci-fi with a comedy twist. How did comedy help you write science fiction? Because it's very hard to pull off sometimes science fiction comedy or fantasy comedy or horror comedy.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't consider these comedies. I just use the word humor because I really tried to write straight sci-fi story in each of them. But sometimes I couldn't help myself. Sometimes, but like it's not, and the way I make the distinction between comedy and humor is it's not written for a joke, it's not written to be funny. Some of the characters might be witty. Obviously, this one has a pretty outrageous storyline, so I really tried to ground it as much as possible. So it feels real, but every now and then the narration might have a certain humorous insight, or one of the characters might purposely make a joke because that's who they're the smart-ass character. But I wouldn't, and I hope y'all get it, but it's not really comedy. It's if you like sci-fi, you'll like it and you'll smile along the way. It's more for smiles than laughs.
What is the storyline?
The storyline? You know, I worked so hard on the blurb, I'll just read it to you.
Okay.
Those are hard to write. the words.
They are.
It's not easy.
When a highly sophisticated race of alien insects arrive to exterminate mankind, mythical creatures from human lore turn out to be more real than anyone imagined. It is an epic battle for the preservation of our planet, and no one is left out. Oh, and some of them fall in love. This one, a time travel story, a crime story, a paranormal story, and a love story, all rolled into one. TJ is a seasoned ex-con, a thief by trade, a quick-witted rogue, and a lovable scoundrel by nature. After paroled from San Quentin, he manages to get his hands on a time machine built into an Apple Watch and goes back to 1932 to invest $10,000 in IBM with the intent of returning home to collect his millions. But his plan is made complicated when he comes face to face with the beautiful woman who has haunted his dreams since his childhood.
Like somewhere in
Yeah, you could ooh. I'm good with ooh.
A follow-up question. What got you interested in writing science fiction specifically?
I always loved science fiction. When I first came out here, and my two student films were quasi-science fiction, not exactly, but they were close. And when I first kind of started writing spec script, decided I'm going to write a spec script. And so the first was had the Night Court not taken off when it did, the next thing would have been a sci-fi. Like that was the plan. And that's another thing. Others will pigeonhole you, don't pigeonhole yourself.
Right.
If you're trying one kind of genre and it's not working, try another. Or just have, an assortment of, I have a comedy script, I have a sci-fi script, I have this, I have that. I didn't write that sci-fi pilot because the Night Court thing led to the Cheers thing, and et cetera, et cetera. But I know other people, remember the show LA Law? A friend of mine was on that. We started up more or less the same time. His first spec was a sitcom. I don't remember which one, but he did. He wrote a spec script. He wanted to break into TV writing, and he wrote a spec sitcom. Nothing was happening, so we wrote a spec. His spec wasn't LA Law. It got him on LA Law. So I've always loved sci-fi, and also in terms of as a fan, as a reader, I find most comedy books not that funny. I mean, Joseph Heller's great, Kurt Vonnegut's great, and obviously Mark Twain, who, but mostly it's like really in books, it's the story and characters that drive you, and if the humor is there too, it's a plus. But like Huckleberry Finn would probably still be a phenomenal book if it wasn't funny also. So, does that answer?
Completely.
Okay, good.
Completely.
Who's next? I think.
Any question? You started out as a writer, you became a producer. What did you learn about writers when you became a producer and vice versa? How did your opinion change about producers after you became one?
Okay, well first, producer is a kind of ambiguous thing, because when you ask like, what is a producer? It could be anything. It could be, on 2.5 Men, 2 of the executive producers were Charlie's managers. And it was kind of, you want Charlie? We get this credit. Okay, you get this credit. They did nothing. And actually, we were glad they did nothing. I mean, the last thing you want is someone's manager giving you notes. But it could, on Roseanne and Cosby you mentioned, that was Carsey Warner. Was the company, and they were executive, they owned the company, they gave themselves credit. It could be like what we call the line producer, who's like the nuts and bolts guy doing the scheduling and the budget, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's also writers, and within writers, it's like a rank. You move up from here to here to here, then you get to your producer, and then your and when you finally become the showrunner, you're executive producer. So when you guys watch a show and you see 10 executive producer credits, one of them's the showrunner, and the other 9 could be anything. So in terms of the other part, so I don't know if I learned anything new about writers when I became a producer, but just observations on writers. You guys are familiar with light bulb jokes? How many writers does it take to change a light bulb? What do you want to change it for? It's perfect! Yeah, go ahead.
With your experience in working with different TV shows, what advice do you give young actors with working with writers and producers?
Like new actors, do what they want. And if it feels wrong, figure out a way to make it feel right. Because they have a vision, your job, well, in another thing. So what does a showrunner do in a simplistic way? A movie is the main visionary behind a movie is the director. The main visionary behind an episodic TV show is the showrunner. So directors come and go, and it's how the showrunner sees it. So in a movie for a director or TV for a showrunner, they have an image in mind, and they know what they want. Now, you got the part, so you obviously did something right. Kind of keep doing that, and expand on it, and use it. But if they give you a note that says, go in another way, do it a different way, find a way to do it. One day you'll be a star, and you could tell them to fuck off. But now you're not, so you gotta get them to like you. And that ultimately your goal is to make them want to hire you again.